X-Men. Get it!
Hey everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of Battle of the Atom. This is your all-new, all-different X-Men podcast where we rank every story from A to Z.
I'm Adam.
And I'm Zach, and Adam, I swear, it feels like a long time since we've done that actual intro.
Well, we've been in alternate universes trying to save the planet from absolute destruction, so it's good just to be on a regular episode.
It is a regular episode, except for one small detail.
Yeah, we have a very talented guest with us today.
Now, I want to say something. This is important, and this is in the notes that I am supposed to officially read. Stephanie Burt did not attend the Xavier School or the University of Chicago and has never taken dancing lessons, dated a chain smoker, or been to outer space. Instead, she teaches English at Harvard. Her new book is Don't Read Poetry, a book about how to read poems. We've got Stephanie Burt. Stephanie, how you doing today?
Happy to be here.
It's exciting. I'm excited. This has been kind of a long way coming. Like, we've spent a while planning this.
Well, I'm going to say that we're going to talk about a character who's waited even longer for some things that are important to her. So, you know.
Oh, we are.
That's true. I mean, the stuff we've talked about with Kitty Pryde on this show previously has been like either chased by a demon or getting impregnated by the Brood.
Or not getting married.
Yeah.
We did an entire episode about that one.
Yeah, we did the marriage episode. So
that is a lovely episode, and we may end up with some callbacks to that episode.
Yes, absolutely.
Will we? You may have some callbacks. I will have forgotten it.
I probably have listened to it more recently than you made it, though. So that
probably.
Yeah, that's got to be true for every listener who's ever listened to one of our podcasts. Because I can count on one hand the number of times I've gone back and listened to an episode.
Well, yeah, I'm also going to say that it's impossible to listen to your episodes before you make them, unless you're a time traveler.
Which, look, this is X-Men, so let's see what happens here.
Right. Well, I'm going to say that if you start getting listeners from Earth 1199, that's problematic.
The Bishop Future. Come on.
Oh, Adam, you're supposed to cover me on that one. You know those.
Took me a second. I got it.
I know Earth 811,
Yep.
Earth 1610,
Which is Ultimates.
That's Ultimates. And then I think Earth 23 or something is like Spider-Gwen? Nope, it's not.
No, I think like Spider-Gwen has like a letter instead of a number. It's weird. It's
Earth 2301 is the Mangaverse, which kind of took this to the worst possible place it could. And we're gonna ignore all that and switch over to doing this dang thing. Because this episode was requested by our Patreon supporter, Benjamin Mager. Benjamin went over to patreon.com/XavierFiles, threw money at us so that we would create an entire episode around the story, Kitty Pryde, and Wolverine. This is a 1984 miniseries by Chris Claremont and Al Milgrom, and this is something. Hey, Stephanie, what happens in this one?
Okay, so I'm going to try to plot summary as elegantly as I can, which is frankly not very elegantly. I'm still learning what a plot is.
Okay.
So Kitty's dad, who is a banker, and Kitty's mom and dad have recently split up, being visited by some shadowy people who turn out to be Japanese and who turn out to be Japanese banker gangsters who are doing a shady banker gangster deal to take over his bank. When Kitty learns how much trouble her dad might be in, she sneaks onto a flight to Japan using her phasing powers and ends up being all by herself in Japan in her skating costume. Has to use her phasing power to avoid falling down and getting lost in Tokyo, and feels kind of lost in Tokyo anyway, and gets kidnapped by a guy called Ogun, who uses ninja mind control skills to take over her personality and her body. Perhaps because Chris Claremont or Marvel Editorial or someone wanted more Marvel Japan.
I think Chris Claremont historically has just really wanted a lot of this. He goes back to this well more than once.
He does, yeah. And this is, I think, the first time we've had a white lady mind controlled in Japan.
But not the last.
Certainly not the last. Fortunately for Kitty, Wolverine shows up and fights Kitty wearing a devil mask with horns.
Yes.
Realizes that he's fighting Kitty, even though this is someone with ninja skills and a devil mask who's trying to kill him because it smells like Kitty and she's phasing. Unkidnaps and unbrainwashes her by giving her lots of sort of Zen exercises. There is a Japanese garden that she has to rake, and through a lot of quote Japanese close quote tutorials, removes most or all of Ogun's mind control. But they're both worried that the mind control is going to come back. That brings us to about issue 4, right? Also, Yukio shows up, and everybody.
Yeah, Yukio's there. Yukio's kind of great.
Yukio is kind of great, and Yukio's hair is kind of great, and Yukio's hair is important to some of the story work, actually. As is Storm's hair, but we'll get back to that. Yukio's fat phobia is not great. Yukio keeps making fun of people for being large, even when they're extremely powerful. And that's, it's worth calling out.
I think at this point, pretty much Kitty Pryde and Wolverine just fight Ogun and save the day, kind of.
Well, they do a lot of fighting Ogun, and the character beats that are important when they fight Ogun is that they have to save Akiko, Wolverine's girlfriend Mariko's adopted kid. And there's a lot of talk about whether Akiko really feels like Mariko's daughter, and whether Kitty will find her father, and who will take care of Kitty now that Storm has been depowered and is off on her own adventures. And the talk around the fighting is very much about who gets to be whose parent and who needs a parent. And they have those kinds of talk about who's a good parent and who's a good teacher and what Kitty in particular needs to learn right up until the climactic moment when Kitty and Wolverine use their ninja skills and their powers to defeat Ogun, who, I haven't said this before, was supposedly Wolverine's sensei. Ogun taught Wolverine everything that he knows about ninja skills. And so his sensei being evil and Wolverine now being a good guy is the thing that troubles Wolverine's heart. And Wolverine arranges at the climactic fight in issue 6 for Kitty to have the chance to kill Ogun. And by not going through with it, deciding that she doesn't kill people once they've been defeated, Kitty has shown that she's still herself and she retains her humanity, and she is not going to have any trouble anymore with Ogun having brainwashed her. And then Wolverine kills him because that's the sort of thing Wolverine does.
To be fair, he was trying to kill them first.
Oh no, these are good decisions on everyone's part. And then Kitty and Akiko get together and have ice cream at the end. This is the plot, and the first half of the plot is pretty interesting because it involves Kitty being lost and found and lost again in Tokyo and sort of explaining what Tokyo looks like, and Wolverine going after her, and Wolverine trying to negotiate his competing obligations to Mariko and to Yukio and to the X-Men, and that really drives a lot of his decisions. It's important in terms of character development for Wolverine and for Kitty in a way that it does not get enough credit for. And it has some beautiful visuals in a way that it doesn't get enough credit for because of the other things it does badly.
Well, I think we should talk a little bit about the art, because this is a spiritual sequel to the Frank Miller mini with Claremont. We're returning to Japan. And this is still of a time when, these characters would have disappeared from the regular book for a couple of months and then come back later. Obviously, we don't do that anymore. We just put Wolverine wherever he needs to be. But Al Milgrom, I don't know. I mean, he's not the guy that I necessarily would have picked for this story. And Claremont drags out the first part of this, I think, unnecessarily to sort of get all the setup. When we finally get to the Ogun, possession of Kitty, and then we get into Wolverine coming in, that's when it starts to pick up and becomes a little more interesting. But for me, this could have probably been 4 issues as opposed to 6.
It absolutely should have been 4 or 5 issues, but that's because issues 3 through 6 should have been 2 or 3 issues.
Oh, I agree with that too. You could compress this in a variety of different ways.
Issue 1, honestly, for me, is perfect.
The
art's not perfect. The art's not perfect.
No. Al Milgrom's a good inker and a good editor, not the world's greatest penciler.
No, he's really not. And I found myself distinguishing very sharply between the figure drawing and the facial expressions, which range from perfectly adequate to inadequate.
Yeah.
And the storyboarding and panel layout, which is great.
Yeah, it's like he understands the fundamentals of how to tell the story, but he doesn't have the necessary craft involved to do it proficiently.
Well, and it gets worse as it goes along. I wonder whether part of the problem is that he's inking himself and whether there were deadline issues, because when there's also a particular challenge for pencilers involved here, which is that he's drawing people of a variety of ages. He's drawing children who are children. He's drawing Kitty being herself and being a kid enjoying ice cream, which he can't do. He's drawing Kitty being a curious teen trying to do adult things, which he's okay at. And he's also drawing possessed Kitty. And frankly, drawing possessed people who don't like change color or lose their faces or get encased in scales when they're possessed. Drawing possessed people is actually a real challenge in a superhero comic, because their facial expression is going to be different from the facial expression they would have if they were not possessed. When Shan possesses people, this problem is solved by having those things around their heads, and then the penciler can draw whatever their faces normally look like. But Milgrom chooses not to do that, and he's trying to give himself a separate repertoire of facial expressions for possessed Kitty, and it fails utterly. And by the issue 6, we get a series of facial expressions, in particular on Kitty, but on our other principals as well, that look kind of thick and rushed and kind of Uncanny Valley-ish. However, there is so much beautiful work in terms of fight choreography and varying the page layout. And from issue 3 on, where there's more fighting, and I sort of noted some panels, there are all these page-long verticals. There are all these layouts in this comic where there's a 5-panel or a 6-panel page, but one or more of the panels goes from the top of the page to the bottom of the page and is like a skyscraper. And I haven't read enough Spider-Man stories to know if that's a cliche in Spider stories, but it's not a cliche in X books, and it's beautiful. There's falling, there's rising, there's weird stuff with perspective. I honestly really like a lot of the storyboarding, and I also think that while this Al Milgrom is not actually good, the fact that the other people who are drawing Kitty in this era are like Paul Smith means that he looks even worse by comparison. And I found myself imagining, what if this comic book were drawn by Paul Smith?
Yeah, that's my biggest hang up from an art standpoint. Because if I'm thinking of Wolverine in Japan stories, I'm thinking of the Claremont Miller Wolverine, which is absolutely gorgeous.
Very, very high standards.
And then I'm thinking of those 2 issues at Wolverine's wedding. That's Claremont and Paul Smith. That's hard. That's a hard comp right there.
Yeah. And we talked about the story and decided for a number of good reasons not to do it. But Kitty goes back to Japan in Kitty, Pryde, Shadow, and Flame, and we get to see what Paul Smith does in sending an adult Kitty to Tokyo. And it's beautiful. Unfortunately, the story is garbage, but what can you do? is that too harsh on Shadow and Flame? I don't think it is.
No, Shadow and Flame, it suffers for a variety of reasons. But I think,
That's good.
Alan
Kitty and Lockheed
Milgram,
Uh,
yeah,
Alan Milgram can't. I mean, Alan Milgram is not good in the way that X artists of this period are really good, but he's not far below the standards of late 70s, early 80s Marvel comics, where there's a lot going on and you read them for the story.
Mm-hmm. Now, I got a question for you, Adam.
Yeah.
How do you feel about Ogun as a character?
I don't have an issue with it. I feel like Claremont likes to go back to these tropes, this idea of sort of the anonymous Japanese ninja that is either the sensei or the assassin, and they're the one that's going to, train somebody, possess somebody, Psylocke somebody. It really doesn't make a big difference, I think, in who it is. It's more of like a symbol. I've always been fascinated by some of Claremont's endless tropes. Like we were talking recently about how, I would love somebody, doesn't have to be me or you, but like somebody needs to ask him what his obsession with like BDSM wear is. But like to his face and be like, what's up with this? Because you do it constantly. But I think another good question is, this is a trope that he comes back to very regularly. It's an interesting kind of piece of cultural appropriation that he feels a need to not only have Wolverine have this sort of samurai past, but now his very favorite character, Kitty Pryde, is going to get to have that same experience in this mini. And I just think it's interesting. It's a real wild choice. Are you an Ogun fan, Zach?
I do not care for him. He has a cool little demon mask. That's
Sure.
the extent of my feelings on Ogun.
Oh, I want to talk about the Demon Mask. Ogun is a really boring villain.
I'm glad we can all agree on that one.
Ogun is a really boring villain who is useful in the way that like a jack or a hammer or any other tool that you need to serve a specific task is useful and could be replaced by another hammer or another wrench. Marvel, I'm not going to defend Marvel Japan, which is full of cliches and
Marvel Japan's just pulp Japan. It's what it is.
Yeah. But there's a lot to like and a lot to defend about in the story in terms of what happens to the characters who are X characters, because it's already been established and it's sort of rehearsed and made clear in a fairly beautiful and concise way why Logan specifically likes being in Japan, right? The sense of order and discipline that you can still be violent in. There's a tradition of organized discipline, harmonious violence, but there are also all these other traditions of self-control and civilization, and it's also different from what he grew up with, and that's exactly what he needs to control the animal in him. And he loves it, and he sort of says that. Now, why is Kitty here, and why is Kitty here with Wolverine? This is not just a story in which Kitty gets ninja powers, but she also comes out of this with a new code name and a sense of having grown up a little. And Al Milgrom, and he doesn't get credit for this, basically designs what's going to turn into her Alan Davis Excalibur costume.
Okay, but it's a lot worse than when Davis draws the Excalibur costume.
Alan Davis drawing everything makes that thing better.
Fair enough.
Even, whatever you think of Kitty with a blue loose-fitting jacket and a sash, version 0.5, it's also a character moment for her where she has figured out what her name is going to be and how she wants to look as someone who's graduated from the first stage of this. It's a really important moment of self-control for her, and it's earned, but it's not quite independence. It's her finding someone else who's going to be a better teacher for this new advanced phase of who she wants to be. And I know everyone talks about this as the sequel to the Claremont Miller Wolverine, but it benefits for me from seeing it in conjunction with the other things that are happening in the X line at the time and in Kitty's life before and after, because she's had Storm as the teacher she looked up to. And Storm is great about teaching you emotional self-control and like how to person, but Storm's the wrong person to teach Kitty how to deal with combat situations, right? That's just like the wrong teacher for her. Kitty needs a new teacher, and this is where she gets one. It's the beginning, I think, of Logan being a safe, thoughtful, demanding, non-creepy teacher to various teens in his life, which is going to continue all the way up until Wolverine and the X-Men, the Jason Aaron stories. There's someone who's kind of important in Kitty's life who has recently spent a good deal of time having a super creepy mentor who wants to control her every move and give her red devil horns.
I have never put that together, but that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
For those who haven't pieced it together, Adam, who are we talking about?
You lost me. What are we talking about?
Okay, which one of Kitty's friends might have a weird mentor who's trying to possess her into having devil horns? Literally at this exact same time.
We're talking about Magic. I'm sorry.
We are talking about Magic. Ileana Rasputin. She's got.
I thought we were talking about current continuity. I got so confused. I'm so sorry.
No, in current continuity, Magic's just cutting off people's heads like it's nobody's
sending
business.
Them into limbo. That was a great touch. But yeah,
I love that moment. Just like
I like that too.
We're all tired of Dark Beast. He's terrible. Sorry.
Oh, I was talking about Sabretooth.
Well, that happened too. She killed both of them, but that was a spoiler alert for War of Realms.
Ileana actually does a thing that Wolverine used to do, I guess, which is it's time to kill this person, and the people around me are the kind who don't kill. So I'm going to send their head to one dimension and their body to another, and bye.
Yeah, Ileana has decided there are no snowflakes in hell, and she has accepted that, and it's terrible and beautiful because we love her. Now, what else we love is this big old list that we've got. It has 243 stories on it.
Holy cow.
Our top 6, because number 6 is important to this story, is Days of Future Past. Number 2. Number 1 is Dark Phoenix Saga. Number 3 is Astonishing X-Men Gifted. Number 4 is God Loves Man Kills. Number 5 is Asgardian War. And number 6 is the Claremont Miller Wolverine. There's a lot of stuff below that.
So this is not as good as the Claremont Miller Wolverine.
It is absolutely not as good as the Claremont Miller Wolverine.
It is not as good as the Magic miniseries,
which we have at number 44 currently.
I would venture to say it is not as good as number 83, which is the Uncanny X-Men Acts of Vengeance story with that good Jim Lee art where Matsudo Sarayama does the same thing to what's her name? Psylocke?
Psylocke. Yep.
Mostly because that Jim Lee art's real good.
Well, and that's a compressed version of this story. Post Siege Perilous. I do think this story suffers from length. I think we're all in agreement of that. And there are some really good character development moments.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of people pick this up and look at the Milgram art, and I think that's going to influence whether they're going to actually invest in this or not.
This is the good things about this story, except for some of the technical storyboarding stuff about fights in cities. The good things about the story really only emerge if you're already invested in one or both of the title characters.
For sure. I am looking.
It's probably not as good as number 127 on our list, which is Madripoor Knights.
Yeah.
Where Wolverine and Black Widow and Captain America team up.
Nope, it is not.
It's probably better than the first 2 issues of Exiles though, which is at 139.
It is better than Negative Zone War.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, I can give you that. I think it may also be better than the Hellfire Saga from Wolverine and the X-Men, which is a little bit,
also
messy.
Too long and messy.
Oh, that's the one. That's the one with like Cade Kilgore and like the Junior Hellfire Club.
Yep. Yeah.
Creepy romance between no, it's better than that. It may be worse than X-Men Endangered Species is the one where Beast visits all the villains to solve MJ and he can't, right?
Yeah, I think Endangered Species is better. That one's real good.
I was going to say that would probably be my ceiling. So that would make this our new 129.
That would. And I thought we were going to argue about that way more than we did.
No. There's some good stuff going on here.
That is way higher than I thought you were gonna place it. But there's so much.
I don't hate it. It needs to be 4 issues and maybe have someone else draw it.
Yeah.
There is I will say that in an imaginary world where Paul Smith draws the exact same script, this is like number 25. But if Paul Smith drew most of these comics, they'd go up. So that doesn't tell us much.
That's very fair. Now, the next story, Paul Smith also didn't draw. In fact, Paul Smith drew none of these stories, which is unfortunate.
It is unfortunate.
It is unfortunate.
Instead, we have Ron Wagner teaming up with our boy, Chris Claremont, to do 3 issues at the end of his Excalibur. This is the end of Claremont's Excalibur run. It's called Girls' School from Heck. Adam,
Hey.
my boy.
Yeah.
What happens in Girls' School from Heck?
Kitty is going to private school. She is dorming there, and the other girls kind of heather her. We get into a Heathers type situation where they're stealing her stuff. You
might call them mean girls.
They are mean girls, yes. At the same time, Mesmero has been abducted by some mandroid type robots. Excalibur is kind of just in the background of this for a while until they are also taken under Mesmero's control. And the whole thing unbelievably culminates with a Bring It On situation where the girls from the private school team up with Kitty Pryde as their lead to do I'm not making this up, a cheerleading routine to save the day. So
wow. Let's talk about the important thing. The cheerleading routine happens at a American football game that is sold out in Wembley Stadium, where this British non-NFL expansion team is playing against the New York Giants.
Yep. Yeah.
We currently have NFL games in London, and can I tell you what? They don't sell out. They don't sell out Wembley Stadium.
No, it's not Yankees Red Sox. That's for sure. So
that's an incredibly timely reference. That was like 3 days ago.
Well, as of this recording, people should probably just tuned into that. I was also informed recently that just by posting a frame of this on Twitter that the captain of that football team is a Captain Britain from an alternate universe.
I don't think that's true, but I want it to be.
All right. Well,
we can pretend.
He does have like a flag on his helmet, but anyway. So yeah, this is an interesting one, especially for Claremont to be wrapping up his run with.
Also, Fenris shows up?
Yes, because Fenris is the one that's behind Mesmero.
So this divides not issue by issue, but sort of plot by plot. The A plot is Kitty goes to St. Cyril's and figures out how she gets along with the other girls there and then has to do a thing to save the school.
It's incredibly contrived. Like, that's the most basic plot you could have.
It certainly is the most basic plot you could have. And like a lot of other very simple plots, it's a chance for some wonderful character work, and I love it. Now, the B plot is Mesmero gets trapped by Fenris into hypnotizing other X-Men, and that's really boring. And
I don't even remember what happened. I read it yesterday.
It's really boring, yeah. And then the C plot is the actual American football game and the cheerleading contest, and the kids from the school who were the mean girls who have trained as cheerleaders, which I guess gives them like gymnastic martial arts powers, beat up some villains from between one panel and the next.
Yes.
And that is 5 kinds of ridiculous and feels rushed even on its own terms. But so much happens in the A plot that I want to talk about.
Is it the capital S subtext for Kitty?
So this is kind of an interesting thing because I think where you're going is that this is a character who is constantly on the edge of being on panel bi, and who fans kind of agree is bi.
Right. I think that's fair.
Right. Now, when we get to the third story we're going to do this episode, we should talk about that more, because this isn't, to me, a story about Kitty's sexuality. Claremont wrote a number of such stories, but this isn't one. This is a story about Kitty's relationship to her peer group and Kitty's desire to fit in, and who Kitty has been and who she has not been allowed to be in her time as an X-Man, which is a thing that Claremont has hit since, and if you want to do your research, 139, which is a super important issue for Kitty, which I'm not sure if you've covered in your 243.
What's that? Is that Demon? Is that Demon?
No, it's not. Wait, Demon what?
Like the one where she fights a demon on Christmas /
143.
Hanukkah?
No, that's 143. 139 is the one where we're introduced to Stevie Hunter.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah, with the...
It's the first time that she gets whole pages that develop her character.
Yeah, and that's the Hope You Survive the Experience one.
Yes, it's exactly, yeah. And there's a reason that's famous, and there's a reason that's a tagline, and that's a great issue for a whole lot of reasons. But one of the things it establishes is that Kitty is somebody who's always either a student or, as it's going to turn out, some kind of teacher. She's someone who's always either in the company of adults who are saying, well, you're quite young, but you're amazing, or she has to do weirdly adult things like fight a demon with a jet plane. And she has really never had a group of peers. The other thing that she's never had is she's never actually been bullied.
Hold on, I got to jump back to one thing.
Yeah.
Have you in your adult life had to fight a demon with a jet plane? Because that's not an experience that I've had. I didn't think that was a common one for adults.
Well, I mean, it is an unusual job, but in general, piloting jet planes is not a thing we want teenagers to do, nor is fighting demons, although it does happen. It's kind of an adult job, right?
I think you're stretching the definition of job, but I'll allow it.
There's at least one air traffic controller in X fandom. You may know her. We can ask her. In any case, Kitty has been asked either to superhero or to be the youngest one in the room by a lot since she showed up during the Dark Phoenix saga. She hasn't had a peer group. She's always sort of wanted one, and she's always wanted to be kind of partly normal, and she can, right? She can pass. She has enough social skills that if she really wanted to, she could just live a normal life, which most of the other X-Men couldn't do. The only other X person who's really significant at this point in continuity who could have chosen to lead a normal life based on the way she way she looks and on her power set is Jean Grey, who Kitty has barely met. So this is Kitty's first peer group experience. It's also her first experience of being the target of peer bullying. And those go together. And she has to sort of figure them out. And she figures them out in a way that a girl who wants to be popular would. And a girl who wants to be popular with this particular set of school kids who, as we learn in the first sort of, I think midway through the story, they're all people who've been kicked out of other schools. They're all rejects. They're all kids who would be into mischief. Apparently, the reason the school is called St. Cyril's is that it's a reference not just to the tradition of girls' school stories in British comics generally, of which there are hundreds or thousands. There was a magazine called Ginty that sort of did this every month that Claremont would have seen growing up, although it was very, very heavily gendered. It's not just girls' school stories in general, which have all these formulas. It's also a set of sort of New Yorker-style single-panel cartoons about dangerous, mischievous bad girls at a school called St. Trinian's that Ronald Searle drew. So this is tropey in a way that is very, very conscious of what all of its British models are, and it's also important socialization work for Kitty. And compared to other Kitty stories, it's actually not very queer, except for some of the creepy Courtney Ross stuff. But it's mostly about peer socialization and how Kitty gets it. And it's actually got an answer that's going to help young readers, which is if you want to find your peers, and you don't fit in, don't just go chasing around after other adults. Find the other kids who are like you. And I think that Claremont, I mean, I don't know, I haven't asked him, but it's easy to imagine that Claremont, who always said he wanted to cycle characters out of the X-Men, wanted to leave Excalibur by leaving Kitty at this school for a year and then having her maybe come back later. This is actually where she belongs, and her choice to rejoin Excalibur makes sense for her, but it seems sort of forced, especially since it's
It
so
does.
silly.
But I'd say everything about the resolution of the plot of this story seems super forced because it all
Very
just
silly.
kind of has to end.
It's very
and
silly. Yeah.
would you guys agree that perhaps this arc in general just also feels like a little bit out of left field in terms of what was happening in Excalibur leading up to it? Like, all
I
Kitty
think it's
really had to do was walk down the street and say, "Hey guys, I'm back."
I think
Um,
this is weird by Excalibur standards, and that's saying something.
well, and it's so Stephanie is talking so eloquently about all of the stylized tropes that Claremont is accessing here to tell this story. But it is fascinating to me within the grand scheme of what's going on at the same time that this is coming out. This is 1991. We're talking Mutant Genesis. We're talking, this is post, this is around or post Muir Island Saga, and Claremont is getting ready to pack up his bags and leave the X franchise forever. And it's wild to me that, when we see Alan Davis come back to Excalibur, he wants to wrap up a lot of the stuff that he and Claremont developed in the first, 25 issues or so. It is wild to me that if it is his intention to say, "Hey, Kitty Pryde, take a Cyclops style little sabbatical here, and then we'll catch up with you later," that this would be how he would do it. I just find it so strange. And the other thing that I just can't get over in this story is that we were just talking about the Kitty Pryde and Wolverine miniseries, which I think to its detriment overpowers Kitty Pryde to the point where she is, if we're to take what happens with Ogun literally, she is like an invincible ninja assassin now. And the way in which she gets friends for a big part of it is that the other girls see her stand up to the bullies, but then they also see her doing her sort of karate ninja training out in the field and are like, "Yo, she's the real deal. She's going to kill us." Or she could. So maybe we should stop bullying her. I just like the two aspects of those characters are very, very interesting to me. And then if I want to, you were Stephanie, you were talking a little bit about the idea of Kitty always being a student. I think a lot of people's, most strong impression of Kitty Pryde is that back cover of one of the early Excalibur issues with her fixing a computer with Lockheed by her side. Yeah.
I have that up in my office.
Yeah, it's a beautiful piece. But the idea that this invincible ninja assassin, who is also the technological whiz, is now going to sort of fit into this other stylized kind of storytelling in a private school, for me, it doesn't add up.
I think I agree with you there, Adam. For me, it's a weird, Kitty Pryde contains multitudes.
All the great
but
characters too.
I love Kitty. Kitty's great. This is real far in the other direction of the Kitty we even just read about in the last story.
No, it's a mess by the end, and it does what all the second tier Excalibur stories do, which is it leans so far into a genre that is not a normal genre for superhero comics, that the superhero stuff and the superheroes who we know from previous continuity don't seem to belong in it.
So here's what I think I'd say about this story.
Hmm?
It's worse than Kitty Pryde and Wolverine.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
I'm trying to see what else we have on this list that would
Well,
be
at 134, we have Excalibur 91, which is a really
Is that
fun
bar
standalone
issue?
where they all go to the bar and drink. I think this is worse than that.
I do too.
It's worse than X-Men Gold 30.
It is.
Yes, definitely.
You have that. Never mind. They're your
Yeah.
rankings. They're your rankings.
It's okay.
X Campus is another high school X-Men story
That
at 187.
That took some risks, though. I mean, that's sort of like an alternate universe type situation. I think I like that more.
I think this is better than Bishop's Crossing at 190, though.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
I'm a little bit defensive about that because it's my guy, but
it's definitely better than District X, which is right below it.
Yeah, I would have to go to Bishop's Crossing, but I wouldn't defend District X. So I'm okay with it being at 191.
We can make Girl School from Heck, Excalibur 32 to 34, our new number 191.
Nice choice.
I am fine with that.
All right.
It's not the worst that Excalibur gets.
No. I mean, the stories, Excalibur stories that are not written by Claremont or Davis can be so bad.
Oh, yeah. Well, they're the only ones that really get what they were trying to do with the book.
But what they were trying to do was really hard to do.
Oh, sure.
Look, Claremont also screwed up with Excalibur, or do you not remember the Dirty Pair story that he has in the middle of the cross-timed caper? That's an absolute nightmare.
I'm sure I read it at one time, but I have no memory of it. Someone wipe my memory.
Yeah. It's the point where you realize the cross-timed caper has gone on for far too long.
Oh,
and
yeah.
we still have 6 issues to go.
You know,
it is a thing.
If he'd wrapped up the cross-time caper sooner, maybe we would have had some more room to develop Girl School from Heck. It would be a more fun story. Or not. Perhaps
greatly
not.
Possible. Yeah, for sure.
Now,
this last one's weird.
Yeah, we've been talking about weird. This is weird. This is a story that came out in 2014, written by Peter Milligan with art by David LaFontaine. It's all new Doop.
Yep.
Yeah, which is basically like what happens in between the panels during Battle of the Atom.
Yeah, this is the what's the famous Shakespeare thing that's a riff off Shakespeare, like two side characters from Romeo and Juliet.
Rosencrantz and Guildenstern.
Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. Yeah, by Tom Stoppard. It's a play.
Yeah, that's that for Battle of the Atom, which is just wild that exists. Because here's what happens during Battle of the Atom, and this is all canon. Doop, which let's take a ranking. I love Doop. Adam, do you love Doop?
I don't know if I love Doop. I like Doop. I don't know if I love Doop.
You're dead to me. Stephanie, do you love Doop?
I love this story. I do not love the Doop Wolverine and the X-Men story.
Wow.
What? Hold on. What?
It's fun. It's fun.
We're big fans of that. Sorry.
It's a lot of fun, but honestly, I'm here for the art and I'm here for the character development. And there's not a whole lot of character change and growth that happens in the one about Doop.
That's true. It's an Easter egg of an issue.
I like to think that we get a lot of insight into what makes Doop tick there, specifically a little bit more than this issue or these issues. But I digress.
Oh, I don't know about that. This is pretty much, while this is the literally the marginalia of Battle of the Atom, we're essentially getting a Doop origin story with this to a certain extent. It's weird.
Because, here's the first big thing that happens in this story. During the middle of Battle of the Atom, Doop does propose to Kitty Pryde.
Yes.
Right.
And he takes her on some weird dates in the margins of the world.
The Doop verse, yeah.
And then he kind of does some things in Battle of the Atom trying to get Kitty to make a decision in her life.
Mm-hmm.
Because he knows that she needs to be pushed.
Right.
And then the book veers off for 2 issues about Doop's mom.
It's got 3 issues that are Doop helping Kitty figure out what she wants to do in Battle of the Atom, which we should a little explain what's going on there. And then the second, the 4 and 5 are about Doop, and they're not really about Kitty. But 1 through 3, I mean, this could have been 3 issues, but the 4 and 5, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
You're absolutely right. This doesn't need to be 6 issues. It is chock full of stuff. It allows Peter Milligan an opportunity to bring the anarchist into it. Yugo Girl has an appearance, but you're right. We go from Doop trying to help Kitty figure out whether the kids should go back, the O5 should go back or not, to this wild origin story, which is that Doop believes that he was the creation of Ingmar Bergman on a doodle of a page,
Right.
which just is so perfect for the character of Doop. That's a brilliant concept by Milligan, and he's also dealing with this like absolutely bizarre thing with his mother, who's also his father, and
Well,
all
you
of
gave it
these.
away.
Yeah,
That's the spoiler.
Is that a spoiler? Like, not to be rude, but is the specific autonomy of Doop's family? Like,
Yes.
I
Yes,
didn't
it
know
is.
that people were curious about that.
So no one's, I mean, I don't really care about it in terms of Dupe, but Dupe, this is, you brought up the queerness of X-Men and
Yes.
the bi-ness, the always almost confirmed but never quite confirmed on panel bi-ness of Kitty and Girl School from Heck, where I don't think it plays a major role. Here, and I don't know Peter Milligan, like I don't know Shade the Changing Man, I don't know all the other Peter Milligan work, so I don't know whether this is the kind of thing he does all the time. This is an issue about the relation that queer X-Men fans have to these characters and this property. This is an issue, or not even an issue, this is a set of 5 sort of ridiculous, beautifully cartoony, and very consistent. This has exactly the look that the story demands, which the other 2 stories that we looked at like didn't have. This is a beautiful and ridiculous until you see it, and then I hope you kind of see it, kind of slightly also heartbreaking look at what queer readers have been doing with this property since about 1977. Because it's a story about being this misfit who thinks you're alone in the world and has to sort of make the world up as you go along, literally existing in the margins of this superhero comic, trying to figure out where to come into the story and how to tell your own story, right? Which Doop is a documentary filmmaker, and sometimes how to tell a story that puts you at its center and is kind of self-aggrandizing, because Doop also makes Doop's self sort of the star of a story. And as Doop goes on his date with Kitty, which brings in so much of the history of this character. One of the jokes about Kitty is that she's everybody's girlfriend, and that cishet guys who are writing X-Men will never let you do anything with this character because they all want to date her, right? And she's dating Bobby at the beginning of the story. And the big plot advancing decision that Doop has to help Kitty make is to side with the Cyclops team and against and leave the Wolverine and the X-Men team, and go against her colleagues and say, no, you can't send the O5 back to the past. That should be their choice, and they don't want to go there, and that would suck for them, right? But the other decision that Doop is helping Kitty make in 1 through 3 is the decision to break up with Bobby because she doesn't belong with Bobby. And this has the shippiest Kitty and Rachel panels that we've seen.
It has some shippy Kitty and Rachel panels. It takes what were shippy panels in Battle of the Atom and kind of turns them up another notch.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So Doop is in exactly the position of what is it at this point? 40 years of queer readers who are bouncing around the margins of X-Men comics, hoping Kitty will stop dating men.
It's absolutely wild that I've read this story multiple times and I've never had that read.
Really?
But
okay.
I don't think you're wrong is the thing. I think I'm bad at reading. Or that's not, or probably more realistically, those aren't my experiences. So that's not the kind of context that I'm looking at stories with. So I really I'm sitting here just quietly nodding. She's making some really good points here. I think I might have misread this one.
I mean, the silliness is there too. This is how great X-Men comics worked, and this is a very good X-Men comic. A great is a weird word. No, don't beat yourself up. Like, there are a lot of X comics that are written more for you than for me. But I really felt seen by this, as absurd as it is, and it's really consistent. It's consistent even when we get to issues 4 and 5, which aren't as good, which are Doop's backstory, in which it turns out that Doop is not whose name, by the way, is interesting. Has he been duped by comics, or is he duping us? That may be overreading, though. Doop is not the product of a sad high culture tragedy that wants to get back to high culture status, but rather the product of this entire family of what does he say? Asexual, hermaphroditic, sort of green entities. And what Doop says about that. There's Carl Jung at one point points at Doop and appears to be Stan Lee. I don't know if you know that. It's
yes,
Stan
I did
Lee
catch that one.
Yeah, and I looked up pictures of what Carl Jung looked like in his sort of 60s and 70s, and it's Stan Lee. But hang on, this is near the very end. I always thought Doop was the only boy girl in our family, which meant more guilt and shame. X-Men is about a lot of things, including, fun fights with people with claws, but X-Men is also about finding queer community. Doop doesn't seem to identify as queer. Doop actually, there's a panel with Doop in a limo kissing a man and kissing a woman, where Doop just says, I got a lot of love and the therapy worked and I don't like labels, which is valid. But Doop is certainly, if Doop were human, Doop would be intersex. And the way that this story ends, having convinced Kitty to break up with Bobby and then go do this shippy thing and switch teams, right? Kitty literally switches teams. We then get 4 and 5 that are just Doop, and the terminating conditions, the way the story ends, are Doop stops feeling guilt and shame because Doop realizes that there is an entire community of boy girls out there. And then Kitty goes to her old team and says, I can't do this anymore.
I gotta be honest, Stephanie.
Yeah?
When we were picking the stories for this episode, I thought this one would have the least amount of subtext and context or queer content in it. And I just picked it because it was a story that I like because I like Doop.
I like the story too.
I cannot believe how well this lines up. That's
well, and if we want to take the idea of the switching teams literally, we do get to a point after Doop has kind of come to his self-acceptance and Kitty gives him a smooch, where Milligan is pretty much putting it on the line. Doop looks at Kitty and says, you just want to avoid making the toughest decision of your life. Kitty doesn't know what to say, and Doop says, go on, admit it, Kitty. And there's this panel where she just stares off into the distance and says, you mean, and drifts off. And then the next panel is when he kind of brings it back to the Battle of the Atom story. But it's all there, Stephanie, your reading of this is superb. I have to say that I think that the book suffers a little bit when, and this is where being maybe 1 or 2 issues shorter would probably have helped this a little bit, is when David LaFuente is not doing the artwork.
He's just doing the inks, for 4 and 5.
And we get, hold on, I just lost the name.
Federico Santagile.
Santagati, who perfect, very talented. Don't get me wrong. It's just once you get into LaFuente's style, he's doing these very, very impressive 2-page spreads. He's really nailing his version of Doop. So to go back and forth between those two styles is a little bit rough.
Well, and I'll tell you, it's weird because LaFuente is legitimately not an artist I tend to enjoy. He's someone who I could look at his stuff and say, you're talented, you're good, I don't like it.
Oh, see, I love his stuff. I think it's great.
It's a very me problem. I can see the skill and I can see the talent, but I don't personally enjoy it. But I definitely agree. It suffers here when he is not the driving artistic force on the book, when he's only inking it.
Yeah, it doesn't. I don't think it changes quite that much, but it does get worse. The La Fuente stuff is so perfect for the way that this book needs to look, which I wouldn't say either of the Milgram stuff or of the Ron Wagner stuff on the other stories we discussed. And there's such a narrow zone. There's such a narrow, what is this? What do people say in baseball? Strike zone that he has to hit, where this has to be cartoony enough to be a Doop story without looking like it's for children. And we've seen, if you're reading current continuity, we see an attempt to hit that zone go wildly amiss in Apocalypse and the Extract, where you have very adult stories that look like they're for children primarily. And this doesn't. But it also looks like we're in Doop space, and it's not. The other thing that Doop stories like this could easily become is body horror. One imagines
Which there's a little bit of. There's a little bit when Doop rips his entire body off.
Yeah, but that's just so he can speak English.
Yes.
Right.
And that's it's a big step for him. He gives Kitty a ring made of meat, and it smells bad, and there are olfactory jokes in here, but none of those things make your skin crawl. They're just kind of goofily out of place, colorful objects. And it is important in a story about marginal readers looking for queer identity confirmed that it not be horrifying, even though this character easily could be. And the La Fuente art just hits it.
Well, and it's a step up from, we've ranked La Fuente drawing Doop before in A+X. What number is that? We've got that down at 168, A+X number 5, where Doop teams up with Iron Fist. And he's definitely leveling up here. I mean, like, the quality and the detail that he brings to the artwork here is fantastic. And I do think, we brought up the idea of body horror. I do think that there's an element of that. As we saw in Ecstatics in the silent issue, where are they going? Where is the marginalia? Is it like a Gwenpool type situation where we're going through the gutters of the actual comic page? Are we supposed to take it literally? Or are we going like that silent issue? Are we going inside of Doop? Is the Doop world Doop?
I think the answer to all of that is just yes.
Sure. Yeah. It can be all of it. But regardless of how you look at it, it makes it interesting. Doop is constantly showcasing a new power here, where he's digging through the landscape wherever he wants. The inside of a refrigerator, the middle of a fight scene, the background of another scene we've seen out of Battle of the Atom. And it also sort of suggests that Doop is almost the director of the X-Men universe.
I wouldn't say director. He's literally a
documentarian.
He doesn't decide what happens, but he finds angles on it. That's literally his role. Yeah, and you see him with the camera a lot in here.
Yeah, and we can't account for that before Ecstatics, because obviously we've had X-Men comics before Ecstatics, and the story sets up the idea that he moved to LA to sort of like figure himself out. But I don't know. I love that. We thought we were having a Kitty Pryde episode, and we're devoting a great deal of time here to talking about Doop. But everything that you've said, Stephanie, about how this addresses Kitty's queerness is definitely baked into this big time. So
Doop is a reader figure. Doop is a reader figure who's getting literally his own angles on this material and seeing what he wants to see within the limits of a story that he's not ultimately telling.
Yeah.
So there's one more set way in which this story speaks to the other two that we're covering that I want to note, because it's fun and it's another thing to like in here before we get to ranking them. Which there was a little bit of Twitter talk about this morning. In all three of these stories, Kitty shows up in a way that she maybe doesn't need to show up, in a bath or a shower or a hot
she does that a lot.
it is a very X-Men thing to have characters, and they're not always women or girls, but Kitty's one of the people where this happens, show up in a way that, the comics code will allow you in the 80s and 90s to print the comic. You won't get in trouble. But we do tend to see, baths and showers. And there is a wonderful callback to that in this issue where Kitty, fully clothed, pops up in a hot tub, interrupting whatever was going on between a couple other members of the Ecstatics.
Literally nothing, because it would break the hot tub code, and they are explicit about that.
They say that. They say that. And what she says, and she looks like she's covered in goo rather than water, is this is not supposed to be happening. And that is the culmination of the other sort of thread that runs through here, which is Doop seems like he's creepy. Doop seems like a reader who's following Kitty around because he literally wants to get married to her. And he says by the end, and this is a wonderful moment, the marriage proposal was just a ruse. I could have led you to making the same decisions with a job offer and a bowl of oranges instead of a ring made of meat. And I'm not sure that's true, but it's as if it were the entire history of the X-Men saying, this character is not here to be everybody's girlfriend. This character is here as a figure for reader identification. And stories about boys chasing her are good for her when they serve that reader identification. And Doop, uniquely among people who take he, him pronouns, understands that among people who've pursued her.
I love this. I think we could have written this off as something very, very slight. And I love that there's so much sophistication cooked into this thing.
I want to thank Charlotte. I want to thank Charlotte Geeter, by the way, who's done some poetry writing and some fan writing. She was the first person who turned me on to the rich subtext, or text really, of all new Doop. So thank you, Charlotte.
Thank you, Charlotte. I feel like we're all learning, which is fantastic.
Here's what I'll say about this story. I think I appreciate it even more than I did starting this conversation, which is something that sometimes happens here. Yeah. I definitely think I know what the ceiling is.
What's the ceiling?
Number 68, Excalibur Mojo Mayhem. Because it has a lot of superficial elements that are the same about this. But it also has Art Adams, and I like it better. It does also have Kitty running around half naked the whole time. Now that I remember that story from, I think, our second episode.
I absolutely love Mojo Mayhem. But yeah, we're definitely far above some other Kitty stories that we have on the list. At 90, UXM 143, which is the Christmas Demon.
Here's what I will say, Adam. This is a tough one for me.
Yeah.
I think this is better than the time the X-Men met Santa Claus.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
That's only like 2 stories below. We have All New Wolverine Annual, where she switches places with Gwenpool, which I think this is better than.
Yeah.
And What If the Phoenix stuff.
I'm finding it on the list here.
Yeah, there's a big gap there between you're down around like 93, but
yeah, you said Demon's 90.
Yeah, it is. It is. I'm just looking at some of the other stuff that's kind of in between there. And I'm just wondering.
Wait, in between Demon and What If Phoenix?
No, between Demon and, you said your ceiling was Mojo Mayhem. So how high are you interested in going on this list?
I would say it's not as good as Murder at the Mansion at number 85.
Okay.
Probably better than House of M?
I think it's better than House of M.
Is it better than that Generation X Christmas story?
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay, then I think we've done it. We've done it again, guys.
So we're at 86?
Gals and everyone involved. We are at All New Dupe at number 86.
Okay. I'm fine with that. Not having read all 240. Where are we now? 246 of the stories that are here.
Yeah.
Also worth noting that is well ahead of the actual Battle of the Atom at 106.
Which is
an apples to bowl of oranges comparison that
absolutely
you are always making.
Yep.
I want to first thank Stephanie. Thank you so much for being on this episode. It was incredibly insightful.
Thank you. This is so much fun.
Now, I'd also like to thank Patreon supporter Benjamin Mager for suggesting the Kitty Pryde and Wolverine miniseries and kicking this whole thing off. If you want to be like Benjamin, you can go over to patreon.com/XavierFiles. Throw as little as $2 a month our way, and you'll get added to the list. Right now, the next open spot is June 1st of 2020.
Holy cow.
Wow.
We've got a lot of stories in the way and some really good ones coming up that I'm excited for.
Mm-hmm.
But we do have a lot of stories in our way. But, get on that list soon rather than later. Because once you're on for the rest of eternity. Now, what else do I normally say? You can find everything that I do on XavierFiles.com. It's got X-Men stuff. You know the drill. Also, at Xavier Files on Twitter for all the latest and greatest of my thoughts, which calling them great that's a stretch, but I digress. Adam, where can people find you?
Guys can always follow me at Arthur Stacy on Twitter and new pages of Bish and Jube's Crosstime Conundrum every Monday at adamrec.tumblr.com.
And Stephanie,
is so much fun. That cartoon is so much fun. Thank you for drawing.
Thank you, Steph. Appreciate that.
And Stephanie, where can people find you?
Twitter is the best place. And if you look for Stephanie Burt on Twitter and you find the one who seems to write about poetry, you'll get me. But if you like spelling things out, it is at ACCOMMODATINGLY, accommodatingly, on Twitter.
That is great. It's a good account. You should follow it, people.
Thank you.
I follow it.
Thank you.
Good. I'm not telling them to do something I'm not already up to. So
Yeah.
Now, what I'm up to is what we're doing next week. And next week, we're going to talk about the other side of Kitty Pryde from a incredible classicist standpoint, and that is Colossus. None of these, actually, one of these Colossus stories does have Kitty Pryde involved in it, but it'll be interesting. It actually is involved in a very good way that I think will make people who are fans of this episode happy. But until then, this has been Battle of the Atom. We hope you survived the experience.
Get